Hello, my name is host Derek. Welcome to Talking with Film People. This episode is directed specifically at transitional adulthood, namely the period of late adolescence through about 25 or so for guys, maybe a little younger for girls. But, and identifying type specifically. So, type can be a little trickier to identify when people are in that period of time because it's the most social period of your life for, I think, everybody pretty much. There might be some exceptions, but it's when you prioritize most highly concerns that are not practical but are also social. And you have a hard time, certain types will have a hard time differentiating between what's worthwhile social as a social motivator and what's not worthwhile as a social motivator. So, as far as N types go, NTPs are going to be a type that is concerned about social stuff a lot and is also sort of explicitly in adolescence and early 20s is explicitly saying words along the lines of that they're not concerned about social stuff because they're experiencing a conflict during that period of time between their relatively low FE. For the ENTP, it'll be a motivational factor, and yet, but it still comes after more of a motivational factor than for the INTP. But regardless, it comes after T. So it's a challenge because both INTP and ENTP care a lot about other people's perceptions of them, but aren't good at first necessarily managing those or even understanding what those are. Like I've read many times, and I believe to be true because I don't really feel I have a clear understanding of it myself, what even the question means. But it's said that ENTPs do not have a good understanding of how other individuals feel about them personally. That they do understand like how to manage a room or something, but they don't understand how they don't have a clear sense of it. Like, oh, that's how this person feels about me because of Y. So I don't know. I'd love to get input on that notion from Taylor in a second. But let me just wrap up my thoughts on this young adulthood before opening the floor a little bit. I think the key for typing people during that stage of their lives is to first note that remember that introverted people behave in extroverted fashion a lot. It's not so much how they behave in any given moment as it is the pattern of their choosing to engage in external stuff, frequency of which. So get a sense of that first, because introverts, especially during that period of time, will look like extroverts a lot. Second, you can tell most of what you need to know by what they're talking about, and if they're talking with people other than you, listen to what they're talking about. If they're talking about shit like this, then there's a good chance they're an N at least, and if they're talking about it with precision, there's a good chance they're a T also. So those things are factors to consider, and let's see what other people have to say. Taylor, you got any thoughts on typing when young adults transitional adulthood period?
Kind of hard one because I think that you're trying out a lot of different
Right.
avenues and types. At least for an EN, I think that I can stretch out of character for a longer period of time a lot more easily than most people can.
Do you think you're more
I
able to
guess
do that now than you were then?
I think yeah, I think I'm as able to. I don't think
Uh,
it's diminished.
do you think you're more though? Has it grown? Have you grown in that ability?
I think that I've grown in the ability and diminished in the giving of fucks.
Right. Um, do you find it easy? Do you find there's a clear distinction between your behaviors? Do you know when you're constructing?
Not always.
After the fact, is there a clear answer as to whether you were?
After the fact, there are some clear answers. A lot of times there are murky answers.
Do you think you're manipulative?
I think that I can be. That is kind of a point blank question.
Well, it's a question I ask myself all the time. Am I
Yeah, I mean, I
manipulative?
don't know. I've been accused of it, and so of course then you start to wonder, well, am I? Uh, SI's a little bit retarded here, so you're trying to figure that out. But I don't think I think that there's a lot more attributed to manipulation than there really is.
Right.
At least overt planned manipulation. I think that there's a lot of social engineering that just kind of comes naturally to everyone to some extent, and we do it pretty well.
Or really badly. I've gone through
Or
both phases. I've been in the
yeah,
doing it very badly phase too. Okay, so I mean, this is the thing. When you're talking about that period of time, then you're talking about um, when you're dealing with the ends and the ENs. ENFP is going to be probably a little easier to spot, I guess, because they're going to be less aware, less self-aware in some sense. Um, but the S's, you're going to be able to spot them because if you are, in fact, an INTP, which I suspect you might be, based on the fact that you asked the question and that you're talking to us, um, then you're going to be trying to find individuals who are talking about things that seem interesting to you if you're looking for other NTs. You don't want to go the guys who are standing over there and they are discussing how great that particular run was on the snowboarding trip. And but that group might include an ENTP or an INTP or whomever else, right? But to the extent that that's as far as the conversation goes, then you're going to be able you're going to be able to tell who's an, a solidly S individual by who's satisfied by that, who leaves the conversation there, and that fills all needs. You know, ultimately, that's your best guide, I would guess, is what you're talking about. Hami or Claudia, you got any input onto this important matter of transitional adulthood? Ages between 16 and 25, about. It's about a 10-year period.
do you think fun dip in here?
What's that? No thoughts? Okay. So, um, why then do we want, why does it matter, particularly whether we type people in this time period, is the next question, I think, before we put the topic to bed, which is, in my mind, the purpose isn't so much to type the individuals as to see them behaving. Yeah, it's quite possible that Hami's right there. Hami says that INTJs go through the sort of socialization phase earlier. That would make sense in general. There seems to be a mechanism in the universe that says those things at which we have the highest ceiling take longest to develop, and those things at which we have the lowest ceiling take less long to develop. That might be a factor. I don't know. So anyway, I mean, it would tend to say that you have to stop developing at that at a certain point. I don't think you're done developing at it. I think that that phase is just one period of development. Anyway, regardless, the where are we going with this? Oh, so the next question then would be, why are you typing them? And the better question to ask is, can you see displays of specific cognitive functions and actions? So you go, well, this person's doing an FE dance. If you see somebody doing a lot of FE dances, they're probably decent chance they've got FE in the third slot, decent chance they're an ENTP. I suspect that there are certain types that are more prone to going. I mean, I hope you didn't think I mean this. I just want to make clear that I do really think that they're doing all that kind of shit, right? Like making sure you don't misunderstand them and misperceive them or perceive them as something other than they want to be perceived as. That's a giveaway for FE. If you get spotted, you know it's at least somewhere in the stack. And if they're doing a lot of that kind of dancing around, then there's a decent chance it's in the third slot, or fourth maybe. INTPs do some too. And then you can also identify things like SI. If you see somebody who's got a really good schedule kept in their little notebook and they're carrying around and they know when they're going to be places, and you hear in between classes going, okay, so I can't remember. I've got to remember to put this down here, and I've got to make sure I get this done and this, and it'll be all checked off the list. If you hear somebody going like that, then there's a good chance they got SI high in the function stack. Could be second, could be first. So I would go with that direction instead of trying to type people in general. Type instances of behavior and say that is a demonstration of this. That is a demonstration of this. Knowing that everybody can demonstrate all those kind of perspectives, it's just a matter of frequency, and the ones that represent non-conscious cognitive functions may be just repetitions of axioms that they've heard they don't really ever even understand, potentially. Any thoughts on that, Taylor?
No, I guess just kind of one more thought is and particularly in college, when I realized how potent it was, I kind of didn't lead with any. But I pulled out my intuition here and there as almost like a freaking magic trick. People didn't really seem to understand how I did that or what I was doing. They just knew that it was impressive and accurate, and Taylor says it's going to rain, roll up your windows.
Interesting. I mean, it's interesting because, of course, you successfully executed better. You achieved FE goals more quickly by simply avoiding the FE mistakes like an INTP would. But it wasn't from that. It wasn't from the same direction. It wasn't naturally. It was something you had to metacognate into.
I don't know if this is relevant or not, but for like my whole life, basically, I hung out a few levels above. I always had older friends. I was the youngest one in the room, all kind of growing up. So I have no idea if that's relevant. But there it is.
I had a mix. Myself. I think it is relevant, probably. I think that I think a lot of things are relevant. You know, how much can you actually achieve good FE goals with some of the excesses of the ENTP? I mean, how tolerant or accepting is your place of upbringing is relevant as well. I think I suspect I had a more tolerant environment. Like, in other words,
High school.
what's that?
I went to a Jesuit high school,
Yeah,
so I suspect you did.
I suspect I did have a little bit more
It's also
tolerance.
why I can wield the Bible so dangerously.
But yeah, like the kid does give you an advantage in that. I was playing rebel or whatever in high school, but the thing is, the process that you're going to go through is when you're typing to other people, you are learning about yourself too, learning about your own way of thinking, understanding how your own cognition impacts your behavior and your beliefs and stuff like that. So I think the most important thing to do is to not just hang back and say, oh, I'm observing this about this other person, but engage them about it. Say, hey, I've heard this thing that you're doing is described as this. Can you talk about that? Explain what you think about that? Blah, 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 blah. You know? I think it's a good way to go. It'll help you to figure it all out faster. Any last questions or thoughts before I end this video?
Stop looking around.
Not really.
Okay, thank you for watching Talking with famous people.